Welcome to the history section.
Today, we're going to examine the precise geopolitical and geographic forces that were driving that early westward expansion from the Atlantic seaboard.
Right, and specifically the competitive relationships between those early American cities.
Exactly. And the infrastructural solutions they needed to overcome what was really a massive physical barrier,
Yeah.
the Appalachian Mountains.
So the initial pressure points, the things that really define this expansion, were drawn by geography.
Yes, quite sharply. And that geography immediately created a deep rivalry among the major Atlantic ports.
We're talking about New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore.
Those are the main players, and our focus today begins with Philadelphia.
Which was in a very interesting position. It had been the former metropolis, the capital even.
But it found itself facing an existential economic challenge.
Because it lost its political centrality to Washington.
Precisely. Its future suddenly relied almost entirely on shipping and inland business.
So that economic imperative, that need to survive, necessitated a monumental effort.
It did. Punching a viable, reliable path through that formidable Appalachian mountain chain.
And the goal, the ultimate destination, was the Ohio River Valley.
And specifically, the nascent but strategically vital city of Pittsburgh.
So the need for these durable inland connections was just paramount for Philadelphia's survival.
Absolutely. You have to remember, New York was already showing immense promise with its eventual connection to the Great Lakes,
Right. It was starting to control the northern trade routes.
which forced Philadelphia to look south and west. Their investment was squarely aimed at establishing dominance over the Ohio River Valley,
Through the most direct route possible to Pittsburgh.
which was seen, correctly, as the gateway to the entire Mississippi drainage basin.
Yes, infrastructure tells us this effort began with constructing some very robust, purpose-built infrastructure.
Yes, infrastructure designed to handle industrial volumes of freight. And the first major step out of the city was the Lancaster Pike.
This road started as Lancaster Avenue in West Philadelphia.
And it extended 66 miles out to Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
And it has a very specific distinction, doesn't it?
It does. It holds the unique distinction of being the oldest turnpike road in the United States.
Which is really a testament to Philadelphia's pioneering spirit in land-based logistics.
It is. And crucially, when this turnpike was established, the region it was crossing wasn't some wild frontier.
It was already densely settled.
Very densely. As early as 1730, which is 2 years before George Washington was even born.
So the land west of Philadelphia was already heavily populated.
Yes, and settlers were already migrating across the Susquehanna River, even beyond Lancaster.
So that pre-existing population provided the immediate economic justification for such a large road investment.
It did. And the demographics of the settlers in this lowland country are, well, they're fascinating. They give a glimpse into that early American logistics culture.
A significant portion of them were Germans, invited by William Penn himself.
Yes, they settled in concentrated areas near places like Germantown and Lancaster.
And these are the people often called Pennsylvania Dutch.
Correct, but it is a misnomer. The term properly belongs to Hollanders. These were German-speaking immigrants.
And their culture of thrift and industry immediately defined the region's economy.
It did, and alongside them were the Scotch-Irish.
Descendants of Scottish Protestants who had previously migrated to Northern Ireland.
Right. These groups, often staunch Presbyterians, wielded immense cultural and educational influence. They even played a role in the early development of institutions like Princeton College.
And the land itself is critically important.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the richest and most fertile agricultural regions in the world. It's characterized by these gently rolling fields, just ideal for farming.
And you can see the durability and long-term perspective of the German farmers in their architecture.
You really can. They built these solid stone houses, built to last for generations, often with massive, deep chimneys.
A sign of a warm, well-provided home.
And their farm buildings are equally distinctive. They built large, sturdy stone barns, often whitewashed.
Designed to maximize storage for huge harvests.
And they commonly featured what's called an overshoot.
An overshoot? What's that?
It's a design where one side of the barn extends several feet beyond the high stone foundation.
Creating a sheltered area for the stable doors and livestock below.
Exactly. Offering essential protection against inclement weather. It's an architectural investment that reflects a commitment to permanent, large-scale, efficient agriculture.
And what about the quality of the road itself, the Lancaster Pike? Do we have contemporary accounts?
We do. An English traveler surveying the road in 1796 offered, effusive praise.
What did he say?
He noted it was reliably paved with stone, topped with a surface layer of gravel, and critically, it could be used year-round.
Which was a major advancement. So many roads at the time were rendered impassable by seasonal mud.
A huge advancement.
Yeah.
Near Lancaster, the road crossed the Conestoga Creek via a fine arched stone bridge, another expensive and durable piece of engineering.
And the creek itself, the Conestoga Creek, was important for commerce,
Very much so. It gave its name to the specialized practice of Conestoga navigation.
which involved building dams and locks.
Yes, to deepen the water, allowing them to sail boats loaded with agricultural produce down to the Susquehanna River for wider distribution. It linked the area to the broader Atlantic trade network.
But the name Conestoga is most famously associated with something else,
The wagon. The specific wagon invented in this region.
which represented a monumental innovation in heavy freight logistics.
It was built substantially larger and stronger than earlier carts, designed specifically for safe, long-distance transport of massive loads across uneven terrain.
And they were drawn by large teams of horses.
Teams ranging from 4 to 7, sometimes up to a dozen horses. Hundreds of these colossal freight carriers became a common sight on the Great Eastern roads.
And the design was truly pioneering.
Yes, it addressed the specific challenges of mountain travel. Its most notable feature was the unique canoe-like shape of the cargo box.
It curved upward at both ends.
Distinctly upward, yes. And this curvature was engineered to prevent the load from shifting forward or backward when the wagon traversed the steep grades of the Appalachian foothills.
So it was all about stability, making high-volume overland transport economically reliable for the first time.
Exactly. And the wheels were necessarily large and equipped with wide tires.
This wasn't just to bear the heavyweight, was it?
No, it was also designed to minimize structural damage to the gravel road surfaces.
A clever incentive toward infrastructure preservation.
A very clever one.
And the capacity of these wagons, it was staggering for the era.
It was. Historical records detail one loaded tobacco weighing over 13,000 pounds.
Almost 7 tons in a single vehicle.
In a single vehicle. Visually, they were quite striking, too. They were painted in distinctive colors, typically red and blue, and covered by a large cloth canopy supported by hoops.
They resembled the later prairie schooners.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And each wagon was a self-contained logistical unit equipped with a sturdy toolbox, a tar bucket, and a water pail.
And the men who drove these large teams were known as teamsters.
Yes, and they formed a cohesive subculture, rough, often sociable among themselves, and defined by a strong sense of loyal companionship.
And at the end of the day, they'd gather at the taverns along the turnpikes?
Right. They'd sleep on small mattresses they carried, often laid out near the barroom fire, sharing stories.
But the accounts also mention a certain antagonism they held.
Yes, toward travelers they perceived as aristocratic, the so-called fine gentlemen.
They would sometimes deliberately maneuver their immense wagons to, crush a lighter carriage?
It's documented. They'd take off a wheel or crush the frame of a light, expensive carriage. It was a physical manifestation of class resentment on the open road.
The significance of the Conestoga wagon also extended to national security.
Absolutely. During the French and Indigenous War, when General Braddock required transport for his military stores, Benjamin Franklin was tasked with procurement.
And he gathered more than 150 of these wagons?
He did, by taking a massive personal financial risk. He guaranteed the farmers payment if their wagons were not returned, a guarantee amounting to 20,000 pounds of his own fortune.
Though the government did eventually repay him.
They did. But it underlines the immediate and vital role this regional transportation innovation played in large-scale military and logistical operations.
So as we move westward from the Susquehanna River, the Pike extended through established towns.
Through places like Carlisle, Shippensburg, and Chambersburg, eventually reaching the strategic outpost of Bedford.
And from Bedford onward, the landscape changed dramatically.
It did. The road entered a high, rugged strip of land that remained heavily forested. This segment, leading to Pittsburgh, was originally cut in 1758. It is known as Forbes Road.
And it was later improved by the Pennsylvania government after the Revolution?
Correct, thereby completing that essential Pittsburgh Pike connection from the seaboard to the Ohio River.
This evolution of routes, though, reveals a conflict between old and new technologies.
A profound conflict. Initially, pioneers followed paths worn deep by indigenous peoples over generations. These were then widened just enough for pack horses.
And carrying goods by long trains of pack horses became a massive, profitable business.
It did. And here we encounter a classic case of technological conflict. When wagons and later stagecoaches began penetrating the carrying business, the existing operators, the packers, reacted with violent resistance.
And they failed to adapt.
They failed to grasp that they could simply harness their own horses to the new, more efficient wagon systems.
So this resentment sometimes escalated into actual violence.
It did. A centenarian recalled in 1830 the absolute fury of these packers when the first commercial wagon arrived in Carlisle. They sometimes physically destroyed coaches and injured passengers.
And their justification for this violence seems absurd.
It was. They claimed the new stagecoach business was bad for the cloth makers and tailors.
Their reasoning being that people riding in coaches didn't spoil their expensive clothing as quickly as riding on horseback.
Exactly. It's an economically flawed argument, but it reveals a deep personal resistance to innovation rooted in tradition and fear of loss.
Now, let's pivot south for a moment. While Philadelphia was conquering the mountains with its turnpikes, its rival, Baltimore, was fighting its own battle.
Yes, Baltimore, situated on Chesapeake Bay, was another one of the key Atlantic coast cities vying for control of the Western trade.
And its most intuitive route westward was the Potomac River.
A natural choice. The Potomac is deep and wide enough for ocean-going vessels to reach points past Mount Vernon and the new capital, Washington.
But that advantage was cut short by falls in the river.
Right, which prevented ships from traveling farther inland and forced a technological solution.
An early European settlement in Maryland and Virginia was heavily focused on the tidewater country.
Yes, where rivers were deep enough for transatlantic vessels to tie up directly at plantation wharves.
And because water transport was so convenient, roads were largely neglected.
Very much so. Early colonial laws prioritized establishing ferries rather than investing in bridges or roads.
And we see evidence of this in things like rolling roads.
We do. In places like Annapolis, these wide paths were built to allow men to physically roll large tobacco hogsheads to market. That this was the standard system illustrates the initial lack of investment in wheeled roads.
The push out of the tidewater country was strongly driven by figures like George Washington.
His personal experience was foundational. In 1748, at only 16, he began surveying vast tracts of forest land up the Potomac for Lord William Fairfax.
An experience that physically toughened him and gave him an unparalleled familiarity with the Western territories.
Knowledge that proved essential. By 1753, he was commissioned by Governor Dinwiddie of Virginia to carry a critical warning letter to the French commander on the Upper Ohio.
And his guide for this hazardous mission was the famous frontiersman Christopher Gist.
Yes, and their starting point was Fort Cumberland, where Cumberland, Maryland now stands.
A strategic location where Wills Creek cuts through a mountain ridge to enter the Potomac.
Establishing it as the primary military and commercial outpost for Virginia and Maryland's western expansion.
2 years later, Washington served under General Braddock.
He did in 1755. And that expedition led to the cutting of Braddock's Road, stretching from Fort Cumberland toward Pittsburgh.
But the road itself was notoriously poor.
It was. Braddock was forced to heed Washington's advice and switch his military supplies from cumbersome wagons back to more manageable pack horses.
And there's still physical evidence of this effort.
There is. Near Frostburg, Maryland, a crude brown milestone set up nearly 150 years prior still stands, bearing the inscription, "Our country's rights we will defend."
Washington remained a powerful advocate for Western roads until his death.
He did, driven by two key strategic goals. First, to divert Western trade toward Virginia.
And second, a conviction that as long as the mountains separated East and West, the young nation could never achieve full unity.
Exactly. This strategic push culminated in the monumental governmental project known as the National Road, or the Cumberland Road.
And Baltimore, recognizing its potential, aggressively extended the Frederick Pike westward to connect with it.
They did. The U.S. government awarded the first contracts for the National Road in 1811.
A full 6 years before construction even began on New York's famous Erie Canal.
And Congress imposed strict specifications. The right-of-way had to be cleared to a width of 4 rods, or about 66 feet.
And built up in the center with a robust bed of broken stone and gravel, avoiding steep slopes.
And it officially opened to the public in 1818.
The route began at Cumberland, Maryland, then crossed the Monongahela River at Brownsville.
A significant hub for coal and boat building. And it terminated at Wheeling, West Virginia, on the Ohio River.
Though the initial vision of a 700-mile route to the Mississippi was never realized.
It was not. But once opened, the National Road immediately became a corridor of intense, fast-paced commercial activity.
Mail coaches rushed along at up to 10 miles per hour.
A miraculous speed for overland travel in that era, and the freight wagons were colossal, sometimes hauling 10 tons, pulled by 12 horses.
And the road was administered through a system of tolls.
A complex system. Hogs cost more than sheep, cattle more than hogs. But interestingly, wagons with very wide tires paid no toll.
Another clever incentive to use designs that were less damaging to the road surface.
Exactly. The stagecoach companies had evocative names like Good Intent, Pilot, and the Defiant Defiance. The road was teeming with life.
And it functioned as a political highway as much as an economic one. Statesmen like Henry Clay were frequent travelers.
Yes, and there's a famous anecdote about him from Brownsville.
Where he was overturned in Dunlap's Creek.
Right. And after extracting himself from the mud, he reportedly declared, "Clay and mud shall not be mixed here again."
The story goes that he immediately secured funding in Washington for an iron bridge to be built over the creek.
A story that links personal inconvenience to crucial national infrastructure development. These prominent figures rode alongside common citizens, experiencing the road firsthand.
So with the National Road pushing commerce to the Ohio River, what did that create at the western end?
It created the great gateway to the West, Pittsburgh. Its strategic geography is almost unparalleled.
Situated precisely where the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers join to form the Ohio.
A narrow point of flatland, backed by steep hillsides, Washington identified it in 1753 as an excellent location for a fort.
It was captured from the French in 1758 and named for Prime Minister William Pitt.
Yes, and the old brick blockhouse, built in 1764, still stands today, and though one prediction was that it would never be very considerable, by 1816, Pittsburgh was already a burgeoning city.
Its success was rooted in its position as a transportation and manufacturing node.
It connected everything. The Eastern Turnpikes, the National Road, the Portage Railway Canal from Philadelphia, and later the Great Railroads.
All converging to transfer goods to river traffic, heading into the vast Mississippi Valley.
This connectivity allowed for remarkably complex and efficient trade. There's an anecdote about a Pittsburgh man who sent provisions to Oswego.
And on the return trip, filled the barrels with Onondaga salt.
Yes, and he transported it back to Pittsburgh via the lakes and rivers, selling it at half the price of the traditional packhorse carriers from the East Coast.
A profound demonstration of the new logistics chain's efficiency.
It was. And to illustrate Pittsburgh's global reach, Henry Clay often told an incredible story about a full-size ship built in Pittsburgh.
That sailed down the Ohio, across the Atlantic, and anchored in Leghorn, Italy.
And the local customs officer initially refused the ship's papers, stating flatly that there is no such port as Pittsburgh in the world.
The captain had to give him a geography lesson.
He did. The evolution of traffic on the Ohio River itself mirrors this transformation.
From the light bark canoes of the indigenous peoples
to the first major European development, the barge. These were simple, watertight boxes built to carry heavy loads downstream.
And they weren't expected to return.
No, they were dismantled for lumber at their destination, which meant constant, reliable work for boat builders in Pittsburgh.
The next step forward was the keelboat.
A significant one. These were about 50 feet long, carried 20 tons, and were equipped with running boards. Crew members would use long-setting poles to physically push the boat against the current.
A grueling return voyage that could take 3 months from New Orleans to Louisville.
Which makes Captain Shreve's record run of just 25 days a monumental achievement.
Then there were the flatboats, or houseboats.
Yes, used extensively during high water in the autumn to carry not just produce, but entire families with all their belongings, sinking new homes in the West. Abraham Lincoln famously made a voyage on one.
And of course, the introduction of steamboats revolutionized everything.
It did, drastically increasing capacity and speed. But it also bred immediate animosity among the traditional flatboatmen, who saw their skills becoming obsolete.
Much like the packhorsemen's reaction to the Conestoga wagon.
Exactly. While steamboats eventually lost passenger travel to railroads, they remained vital for massive freight operations.
So today, the river is dominated by huge steel barges pushed by powerful steamboats.
Yes, transporting massive amounts of coal from the Great Pittsburgh Seam, especially when the water level is high enough, a level known as the coal boat stage.
To facilitate this, the Monongahela River has been extensively managed with dams and locks.
Correct. The government has essentially transformed the river into a long series of deep, still ponds to ensure sufficient depth for the barges.
And this overwhelming industrial output earned Pittsburgh its famous nickname.
The Smoky City. The thick, perpetual cloud of smoke from the soft coal was legendary.
One visitor mistook 9 o'clock in the morning for early dawn because the sun couldn't penetrate the industrial haze.
It's a striking image. The city became globally famous for iron, steel, and glass. Riding into Pittsburgh by night was a spectacular, almost Dantean view of fiery coke ovens and massive mills.
And there was a crucial economic decision that defined its success in iron production.
There was. The ore, primarily from Lake Superior, was transported hundreds of miles to the coal and coke in Pittsburgh.
It seems counterintuitive to carry the ore to the fuel.
It does, but it was a strategic maneuver. Pittsburgh was geographically much closer to the major end markets, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, where the finished products were needed.
So the savings on shipping the finished, high-value product far outweighed the cost of shipping the raw ore.
Precisely. The glass industry also flourished, with Pittsburgh manufacturing nearly 3/4 of all U.S. plate glass. The sheer volume of freight tonnage it handled annually was and is staggering, more than New York and Chicago combined.
Moving downriver, we find Wheeling, West Virginia, the terminus of the National Road.
Which rapidly grew into a major trading hub for coal and iron.
And farther downstream, Cincinnati, which for a time surpassed Pittsburgh in population.
Yes, and much like Pittsburgh, the industry crowded the low ground by the river, while successful merchants built their homes high on the surrounding bluffs to escape the smoke and, critically, the floods.
Its original name was rather unwieldy.
Los Santaville, a creation of a local schoolmaster, meaning the town opposite the mouth of Licking.
Fortunately, General St. Clair renamed it Cincinnati after the Society of Revolutionary War Officers.
A much more dignified name. The city also acquired the nickname Porkopolis because for 40 years before the Civil War, it dominated the country in pork packing.
And finally, Louisville, Kentucky.
Its existence was dictated by the Falls of the Ohio, rapids that made navigation difficult.
The need to portage goods around these falls spurred the town's immediate growth.
It did, until a navigable canal was dug in 1831. Louisville also served as the terminus of the famous Wilderness Road, connecting it to the rich bluegrass country.
So all of these cities were born from the necessity of navigating and controlling these new western pathways?
Absolutely. They are the direct result of that great push across the mountains. Today we're looking at the early career of Joseph La Barge, specifically his experiences in the 1830s.
And this is really a collision of technology, brutal business practices, and federal law, all centered on the Missouri River.
Exactly. The American Fur Company, the AFC, is the dominant force here, a true monopoly. And La Barge's journey from, well, a teenage laborer to a key figure gives us this incredible window into that world.
So our mission is to see how these forces, commercial ambition, the law, personal rivalries, how they actually shaped life on the frontier using La Barge as our lens.
It's not just about what happened, but how. How the company used its power, how a new technology like the steamboat changed everything overnight, and what it took just to survive.
Let's start with that technology then. The 1830s on the Missouri are really defined by the arrival of steam power. The AFC's first steamboat, the Yellowstone. It wasn't a sure thing, was it?
Not at all. It was a huge experiment. You have to understand, before 1831, everything on the upper river depended on keelboats.
Which were incredibly slow.
Painfully slow and expensive. They required huge crews to push, row, or cordel them upstream against that powerful current.
Just dragging them from the riverbank?
Yes. So the Yellowstone was built to see if steam could actually replace that, if it could break the logistical bottleneck of the upper river trade.
And the first results were promising?
They were more than promising. The 1831 voyage made it to Fort Tecumseh. That's opposite modern-day Pierre, South Dakota.
Which proved the concept.
It proved the concept. It signaled a fundamental shift in the economic geography of the entire West. Suddenly, the time barrier was, shattering.
And this allowed the AFC to project its power much more efficiently.
Immensely so. And that was really cemented the next year, 1832, when the Yellowstone made it all the way to the mouth of the Yellowstone River. That trip is a huge landmark in the history of the West.
So it's into this moment of huge technological change that the young Joseph La Barge arrives.
He does. He actually missed the big annual expeditions at first. Just a matter of timing.
But the company found a use for him pretty quickly.
They did. The Yellowstone was an expensive asset to just have sitting around. So, after its first trip up the Missouri, they sent it south for the winter.
Down the Mississippi.
Down Mississippi to the Bayou La Forge sugar trade. It was a way to keep the boat earning. And La Barge managed to get a position on that southern voyage as a second clerk.
And this assignment, which seems almost like a sideshow, actually proved his value immediately.
It absolutely did. The Bayou La Forge area was almost entirely French-speaking. The steamboat's officers were all English speakers.
So he was a translator.
He was indispensable. The research shows he was constantly in demand as an interpreter, bridging that gap. He was only 16 years old, but he wasn't just another laborer. He had a specific, valuable skill.
And this led to his formal contract with the AFC.
It did. At 16, he signs a 3-year contract as a voyageur, engagé, or clerk.
Let's pause on that term, engagé. What did that mean in practice?
It's essentially a contract laborer, an
Right.
apprentice, really. You weren't a partner, you weren't sharing in the profits, you worked for a set wage.
And in his case,
The total salary for all 3 years was $700. For the AFC, this structure was vital. It gave them a reliable, non-partnered workforce.
his first official assignment was upriver at John P. Cabanet's post.
Right, near Council Bluffs, just above where Omaha is today. This was a major administrative hub. But before he could even get there, a national conflict intervened.
The Black Hawk War.
Yes. After the sugar trade voyage, La Barge was in St. Louis with Caban, waiting to head back upriver. The war created an urgent need for transport, so he took a temporary job on a steamboat called the Warrior.
Under Captain Throckmorton.
That's right. They were carrying government supplies to the post at Prairie du Chien.
And the Warrior didn't just carry supplies. It arrived right at the final, brutal climax of the war.
It did. They steamed right into the Battle of Bad Axe as it was happening. Throckmorton saw a group of indigenous people in the river trying to swim across to escape the fighting.
And he opened fire.
He ordered the steamboat to fire on them. Several were killed. For La Barge, this was his introduction to the relationship between the government and the Native American population. It was immediate, overwhelming violence.
And then there's the detail that emerged later, which makes it even more tragic.
It does. It was later determined that every single person killed by the Warrior's fire was a woman. The records say Captain Throckmorton regretted that action for the rest of his life.
What a brutal lesson for a young man.
It showed him that on the frontier, the lines between military action, commerce, and, frankly, shocking brutality were incredibly blurred. It set a dark tone for what he was about to experience in the fur trade itself.
Which brings us to the campaign against competition.
Yes. Once La Barge finally gets upriver to Cabanet's post, he is immediately thrown into the real business of the American Fur Company.
Which was what, exactly?
It was a war, a ruthless war against any and all competition, just dressed up as commerce. The AFC didn't want dominance. It demanded a complete monopoly.
And any rival was seen as a threat to be crushed.
Exactly. The main rival at this moment was a man named Narcisse Leclerc.
A former AFC employee himself.
Right, which made him dangerous. He knew their methods. He'd started his own outfit, the Northwest Fur Company, with money from St. Louis. He was shrewd, unscrupulous, and he had what the sources call staying qualities.
He was tenacious.
He wasn't going away, and this terrified the AFC. So Cabanet, the post manager, was given a very specific task: end Leclerc's career.
By any means necessary.
Pretty much. The company even authorized him to offer Leclerc $1,000, a huge sum then, to just stop trading beyond a certain point. That was the last resort.
But Cabanet chose a more aggressive path.
He did. He found a legal loophole, or rather, a law he could exploit. He discovered that Leclerc had smuggled a considerable quantity of liquor past the military post at Leavenworth.
Which was illegal, a violation of federal law prohibiting alcohol in indigenous territories.
It was, and the irony here is just staggering. The AFC was notorious for its own liquor trading. But Cabanet saw an opportunity to use the very law they often bent to crush his rival.
He decided to enforce the law himself.
That's the key. He didn't report it to the authorities. He decided to act as judge, jury, and executioner. He even boasted about it in a letter to St. Louis, saying, "Have no fear, I will make our incapable adversary bite the dust."
And the young La Barge is pulled into this operation.
He is. Cabanet organizes an armed party under another agent, Peter A. Sarpy. And this was not a posse. This was a military-style raid. They even brought a small cannon with them.
Where did they set the ambush?
Near Old Fort Lisa. Sarpy chose a spot where the river channel narrowed against a high bank. Leclerc's boat was being cordelled along a sandbar.
So they were vulnerable. On foot, pulling the boat.
completely exposed. Sarpy demanded their surrender, threatening to blow everything out of the water. Leclerc's crew of 30 men were mostly unarmed. They had no choice.
They gave up immediately.
Instantly, the entire outfit, the boat, the trade goods, the liquor was confiscated. Leclerc's expedition was broken up on the spot. For Cabane and the AFC, it was a total victory.
A short-term victory, anyway. The legal fallout was severe.
Oh, it was a disaster for them politically. Leclerc went straight back to St. Louis and filed lawsuits and criminal complaints. The scandal was enormous.
How bad did it get?
The AFC's license to trade on the Missouri was nearly revoked. History tells us it was only saved by the political muscle of Senator Thomas H. Benton.
So they had to sacrifice the man on the ground to save the operation in Washington.
That's it exactly. The company survived, but it cost them a lot of money and public trust. And Cabane, one of their most effective, if ruthless managers, he was permanently banished from the country.
What a lesson for La Barge.
A powerful one. Success out here wasn't just about being tough or smart. It was about understanding the huge, often corrupt, political machine that backed the entire enterprise.
So after the drama with Cabane's exile, La Barge gets down to the actual work of an engagé.
Right. The day-to-day business of trading goods for furs. And his most important, really his most formative experience came that first winter of 1832-33, when he lived with the Pawnees.
This was a full immersion.
It was. He was about 100 miles west of the Missouri, on the Loop Fork of the Platte. And the Pawnees were what were known as permanent village indigenous peoples. This is a key distinction from more nomadic tribes like the Sioux.
Because their lifestyle was more settled, more agricultural?
Precisely. Their villages were made of these large, strong, circular earth lodges. They could be 60 feet in diameter. La Barge later said that from a distance, they looked like modern oil tanks. They were built to last.
And their entire year was structured around this blend of farming and hunting.
Right. They plant their maize fields in the spring. Then the whole community might leave for a big buffalo hunt or a military expedition, leaving the field unguarded.
Which seems risky.
It was, but their reputation was such that other tribes were often cautious about raiding them. They'd return in the fall to harvest the corn and then settle in for the winter. And that winter period was the prime trading season.
Why the winter specifically?
That's when the animals had their thickest, most valuable coats. The men would hunt, and the women would do the incredibly labor-intensive work of preparing the hides.
Creeping them, treating them.
Scraping them down, rubbing them with brains or pork fat to make them soft and flexible. Only then were they ready for trade.
And La Barge's small party of 4 traders lived right there in the village.
They lived in the lodge of the principal chief, a man named Big Axe. This gave them security and direct access. They kept their goods there, did the trading, and stored the furs.
And in the spring.
When the ice broke, they'd load everything into bullboats. These are small, round boats made of buffalo hide stretched over a willow frame and flip them down the Loop and the Platte to the Missouri.
La Barge seems to have found life in the village quite agreeable.
He did. He said the earth lodges were remarkably comfortable, warmest in the winter, coolest in the summer. And he noted this one peculiar detail. There were no mosquitoes inside them.
A major bonus on the plains.
A huge bonus. He said the winter passed pleasantly with trade, ceremonies, games, and gambling. But most importantly for his career, he used the time to learn the language.
He really dedicated himself to it.
He did. Over that one winter, he worked with the post's interpreter, meticulously writing down Pawnee words and sentences. He essentially mastered the language.
And the act of writing itself was a curiosity to the Pawnees.
It was. They saw it as big medicine. This idea that a European could make symbols on a surface and then have them speak back, it was a source of wonder. They would put their hands to their mouths in their gesture of astonishment. It gave them a certain kind of prestige.
But the winter ended with a very stark reminder of the violence of the region.
It did. The incident with the Crow prisoner. In the spring, the Indian agent from Bellevue, Major John Doherty, arrived.
His mission was to ransom a prisoner.
Yes, a woman from the Crow tribe who the Pawnees had sentenced to be burned at the stake. Doherty successfully negotiated her release from Chief Big Axe, paid the ransom, and they started back toward Bellevue.
But the chief's authority wasn't absolute.
That's the crucial point. About 10 miles out from the village, another Pawnee chief, a man named Spotted Horse, galloped up behind them and shot an arrow right through the woman's heart, killing her.
So even with a formal agreement,
The internal drive for retribution, or perhaps a political rivalry, overrode the deal made with the Europeans. It was another hard lesson in the complex realities of intertribal politics.
After that, La Barge finished his work and headed back to St. Louis.
Yes, with a fleet of Mackinaw boats loaded with the winter's furs, arriving in May of 1833.
But his return upriver that summer would be his most harrowing yet.
By far. This was the cholera epidemic of 1833. He was back aboard the Yellowstone, the very steamboat that had started his career, for what was described as a trying and pathetic journey.
The ship had already made its famous trip that year, carrying Prince Maximilian of Wood.
Right, whose journals are so valuable to us now. But this was a second later trip up toward Council Bluffs. And on this trip, the epidemic broke out with just terrifying speed and virulence.
How bad was it?
People were dying within a couple of hours of showing symptoms. The captain, Bennett, lost his pilot, most of his officers, most of his crew. He was forced to stop the boat at the mouth of the Kansas River.
And this is where La Barge, at 17, is suddenly thrust into command.
He had no choice. Captain Bennett had to go back to St. Louis for a new crew. He left the crippled steamboat entirely in La Barge's care. The accounts say Bennett was crying like a child when he left, just overwhelmed by it all.
So La Barge is alone on a boat full of sick and dying men, and his first problem isn't even the disease.
No, it's the fear of the disease. The local settlers in western Missouri found out about the cholera outbreak on the boat.
The graybacks, as they were called.
Yes. They formed a makeshift board of health and gave La Barge an ultimatum: move the boat out of Missouri or they would burn it to the waterline.
But he had no crew. The engineer and firemen were dead.
So he did it himself. He acted as pilot, engineer, and fireman. He fired up the boilers and managed to maneuver the Yellowstone just above the mouth of the Kansas over to the west shore.
Which was outside of Missouri's jurisdiction.
Exactly. It was unorganized territory at the time. A brilliant move that saved the company's vessel.
But he was still isolated. He tried to deliver goods to a nearby trading post.
Cyprian Chateau's post, 10 miles up the Kansas River. He set off on foot alone to let them know he had their goods. But the post was under a strict quarantine against the civilized world.
They wouldn't let him approach.
A man met him a mile out from the post and threatened to shoot him if he came any closer. Chateau sent a message back. Just leave the goods on the riverbank.
A moment of complete desolation.
Almost. A friend of his from his school days, Edward Leguest Chateau, was at the post. He heard what was happening and risked breaking the quarantine to bring La Barge some food and a buffalo robe for the night.
Even other company boats wouldn't help.
No. The Assiniboine, another AFC steamboat, came downriver while the Yellowstone was anchored there. La Barge signaled desperately for help, but the captain, a man named Pratt, just kept going. He refused to stop.
La Barge later recalled that as a particularly harsh blow.
It was a total violation of the unwritten code of the river. But it speaks to the sheer panic the epidemic caused.
And this whole experience gave him some insight into the psychology of danger.
It did. He observed that the danger really only got to him when he was idle. As soon as he was busy, with responsibilities, he forgot the peril. And death was just everywhere. He remembered burying 8 cholera victims in a single mass grave.
The burials themselves were hasty affairs.
Very. He tried to find high ground so the river wouldn't wash the graves away. But they were marked with a simple wooden board, if they were marked at all. He later reflected that the entire shoreline of the Missouri was basically one continuous forgotten cemetery.
Relief finally came, but from an unexpected source.
Captain Bennett returned, but he arrived on the Otto, a steamboat belonging to the opposition, Sublet & Campbell, a rival company.
So he had to work with a competitor to rescue his own ship.
Just another sign of the complex, cutthroat world he lived in. The Yellowstone finally made it up to the post in August.
And the post had a new leader.
Yes, Cabani was gone, replaced by Joshua Pilcher, a real veteran of the trade, former president of the Missouri Fur Company. And Pilcher seems to have recognized La Barge's abilities right away.
He put him to work immediately.
Sent him to the Pawnee villages to buy buffalo meat. But when La Barge and his companion got there, the village was empty. Everyone was out on the hunt.
And they were low on provisions.
So they decided to, let's say, forage from the empty cornfields. They tried to be clever about it, taking a little bit from all over the field so it wouldn't be noticed.
Did it work?
No. The Pawnees noticed as soon as they got back. La Barge and his companion ended up having to pay for the corn they'd taken.
It was during this time that he had the close call with the Sioux War Party.
Right. They were out foraging when they were spotted. The problem was, La Barge's mule was much slower than his companions. He knew he couldn't outrun them.
So he made a stand.
He did. He told his companion to ride for help while he held them off with his rifle. And the open plain actually gave him a strange advantage.
How so?
There was no cover. The Sioux warriors had to approach him out in the open. Every time they got close, he'd level his rifle and they'd back off. He kept them at a distance until help arrived.
And that earned him some respect at the post.
It did. The old mountaineer, Etienne Provost, was there and commended him for not showing the white feather.
Pilcher's trust in him led to a very unusual mission that November.
Yes, sending him downriver by canoe with 2 20-gallon kegs of alcohol. And this journey coincided with a truly spectacular celestial event.
The Great Meteoric Shower of 1833.
He was camped on an island when it began. The sky lit up, he said, as bright as day for about 2 hours. It was terrifying for people who didn't understand what it was.
And his companion completely panicked.
Believed it was the end of the world. He started begging La Barge to open the kegs of alcohol, quoting scripture. Eat and drink, for tomorrow we die.
A classic frontier response to the apocalypse.
To add to the surreal nature of it all, a deer, terrified by the lights, ran right into their camp and La Barge shot it.
The winter continued to be eventful, a murder at the post.
Yes. In January 1834, a half-breed hunter named Pinot got drunk and shot and killed a European hunter named Blair. Pilcher put him in irons, ready to send him to St. Louis for trial.
And La Barge's own father was the one who transported the prisoner.
He was. He'd arrived with the Winter Express, and he insisted on a very strange condition for the journey. He made Pilcher remove the irons.
Why would he do that?
For purely practical and, humane reasons.
Uh-uh.
He argued the man would freeze to death in irons on the long winter journey. He put him on a mule instead, trusting that his own horse was fast enough to catch him if he tried to escape.
But the trial in St. Louis was a sham.
A complete travesty of justice orchestrated by the AFC. The company was terrified that a public trial would expose their illegal liquor sales at the trading post.
So they suppressed the evidence.
They made sure none of the witnesses from upriver, the people who actually knew what happened, were anywhere near St. Louis during the trial. Without witnesses, the prosecution had no case.
And Pinot was acquitted.
Acquitted of a cold-blooded murder, all to protect the company's business interests.
Despite all this, La Barge's personal reputation for reliability was growing. Pilcher gave him a major responsibility.
He did. He asked him to carry the Express all the way to Fort Pierre. This was a job for veteran voyagers, and La Barge had never even been that far. But Pilcher told him, "I can't trust him. I want you to go."
So he set out alone.
Alone, on Pilcher's own horse. He lived off the game he shot along the way. Classic frontiersman stuff.
And he had another encounter with wildlife that tested his nerve.
He did. He was camped near the Vermilion River, roasting a prairie chicken, and he looked up to see 4 gray wolves just staring at him from the other side of his campfire.
What did he do?
He just held his position, kept his rifle and pistols ready. Eventually, the wolves just backed away and left. The mission was a complete success, and Pilcher was highly impressed.
His final year as an engagé was just as dangerous. In the spring of 1834, he was back with the Pawnees,
helping bring the winter's furs downriver. And while they were there, a band of Sioux raided the village and stole about 60 horses.
So the traders had to join the posse.
They had to. La Barge and a companion named Brissier joined 75 Pawnee warriors in pursuit. They tracked the thieves for 2 days and found them camped on the Elkhorn River.
And they attacked.
At daybreak. They killed 11 of the 15 Sioux thieves and got all the horses back. A brutal but effective recovery mission.
The journey downriver presented a different kind of danger, a more persistent one.
Rattlesnakes. The Platte River area was infested with them. They were a constant annoyance in the camps, looking for warmth, crawling into blankets.
La Barge had a particularly close call.
He woke up one morning to find 2 of them curled up under his coat, which he'd been using as a pillow. The main danger wasn't really them attacking, but you accidentally rolling over on one or stepping on one.
Yeah, he says he never saw anyone die from a bite.
Never, in all his years. He noted that pigs were the best exterminators. He recalled a place near the Bijou Hills where a colony of them killed 130 snakes in just a few minutes.
His next assignment involved caring for horses over the winter, which brings us to this fascinating detail about their feed.
Yes, at Bellevue. He was in charge of 150 horses, and their primary food source for the winter was the inner bark of young cottonwood trees.
Horsewood.
That's what they called it. And it wasn't just survival food. It was considered excellent forage. Sometimes they even preferred it to grain. But preparing it was a whole process.
Especially in the freezing cold.
You had to cut the trees into logs, then stand the logs up by a fire to thaw the bark. If you didn't, the frozen shavings were sharp like little razors.
And they could injure the horses internally.
Exactly. Could kill him. So they'd thaw the bark, peel it off with draw knives, and chop it up. And then the stripped logs would be used for steamboat fuel the next season. A very efficient system.
It was during this winter that he had his most famous near-death experience.
The air hole incident. He was crossing the frozen Missouri River during a blinding blizzard. There was a path he usually took that ran between two large open catches of water, two air holes.
But the blizzard wiped out the path.
And in his confidence, he missed it. He walked straight into one of the air holes.
The current could have pulled him under the ice instantly.
That was the immediate terror. If it was the downstream hole, he was gone. He went under, hit his head on the underside of the ice twice, and just as he was about to lose consciousness, his head broke the surface.
How did he get out?
Sheer will. He grabbed the edge, managed to pull out his knife, stabbed it into the ice to get some leverage, and hauled himself out, still holding his rifle.
But now he's soaking wet in a blizzard.
A new, equally deadly problem. He was at risk of freezing solid in minutes. He had to race back to the post. The full emotional shock of it, the terror, didn't even hit him until he was safe and warm by the fire.
And one of the men at the post had a very fatalistic take on it.
Martin Dorian. He told him, "Your time hasn't come yet. Your work remains to be done." The idea that surviving something like that meant you were destined for something.
This highlights another of his key skills. He was an expert swimmer.
He was. It saved his life and saved company property more than once. He was known for being able to leap off a boat, outswim a deer crossing the river, and kill it on the opposite bank.
He rescued a boy once.
In 1850, a boy fell off the steamer St. Ange right near the paddle wheel. La Barge dove in without a second thought and saved him.
So this incident marks the end of his 3-year contract.
It does. In May 1835, he returns to St. Louis. He then spends the next 4 years in a sort of apprenticeship on the lower river, working his way up from clerk to pilot to master.
And this is where he really hones the skills that made him famous.
Exactly. But it was a dangerous time to be on a steamboat. He saw a lot of wrecks. The St. Charles burned. The Booneville and the Platte both sank on snags.
And he finally leaves the AFC in 1840.
Over dispute about an assignment, they tried to move him from one boat, the Emily, to another, the Trapper. He refused, and that was that. He left their service.
During these years, he also had some interesting brushes with other historical figures.
He did. He saw the Mormon leaders, Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon. He said he disliked Smith's demeanor. He was also on the boat that transported Daniel Boone's remains from Missouri back to Kentucky.
Which sets the stage for his next big move, going into opposition against the AFC.
A very dangerous move. The term opposition on the Missouri meant any company crazy enough to compete with the AFC, and they almost always failed.
But La Barge was determined. He used his savings, got some backers in St. Louis, and chartered a steamer, the Thames.
His plan was to trade at Old Fort Lookout. But he started too late in the season, and the boat got iced in at Council Bluffs. He had to continue the rest of the way with wagons and then sleds on the frozen river.
And his first move was to hire his old nemesis, Narcisse Leclerc.
A calculated risk. He found Leclerc destitute and figured the man's hatred for the AFC would guarantee his loyalty. But Leclerc's presence immediately attracted the company's attention.
Spies?
A party of them, led by a European named Bruyere. Leclerc recognized them immediately. Their mission was to find La Barge and break up his expedition.
La Barge's response was clever. Psychological warfare.
He invited them all to a feast. He fed them, gave them liquor, and got Bruyere talking. Bruyere confessed everything, but said La Barge had treated him so well that he was switching his loyalty. La Barge's plan was to just get them all incredibly drunk and then slip away.
He made it to Fort Lookout, and then the AFC made its move.
A very polite, courteous letter arrived from the agent at Fort Pierre, inviting him for a friendly visit to discuss business.
And La Barge was immediately suspicious.
Because the messenger, the agent's own brother-in-law, arrives completely unarmed, which was unheard of. It was a ploy to make La Barge let his guard down.
But La Barge didn't fall for it.
No. He pretended to think about it, took a walk, and found where the messenger had hidden his guns a few miles away. He confiscated the weapons and then agreed to go to Fort Pierre, knowing the man was now genuinely unarmed.
The confrontation at the fort revolved around alcohol.
The agent's main strategy was to get La Barge drunk. They pushed him to drink all night. La Barge refused, maintaining total sobriety.
Why was that so critical?
He knew their methods. He figured if he lost control, they could easily arrange an accident, get him into a fight with an indigenous person having killed. Or they could get him to sign a bad deal while he was intoxicated.
The deal eventually came, but what forced him to accept it?
Bad news from his own camp. Leclerc, the man he'd hired, had taken a third of their trade goods and gone off on his own without authorization. His venture was falling apart from the inside.
So he took the AFC's offer.
He did. They bought his entire outfit at a 10% profit and offered him a 3-year contract. But the agent had one last dangerous condition.
He had to go retrieve the goods Leclerc had taken. Alone.
Yes, from the Little Cheyenne Post, right in the heart of territory controlled by the Yanktonese, the most hostile Sioux tribe. They would be furious if they knew he was selling opposition goods to the ASC. It was a suicide mission.
But La Barge outsmarted him.
He stopped at another post on the way and used his new authority as an AFC man to get the help of a well-respected interpreter, Zephyr Rencontre.
And Rencontre had a better idea than trying to move the goods.
He said it would be suicide. Instead, he proposed a paper transaction. Just do the inventory and sign the receipts there to hide the sale from the Yanktonese.
While this was happening, La Barge was essentially under siege in a lodge.
The Yanktonese became more and more aggressive, slashing the tent, firing guns into the fire to shower him with coals, trying to provoke him into a fight. He somehow kept his composure.
And then they made their escape.
In the middle of the night, Rencontre finished the paperwork and a young indigenous guide appeared. They began a frantic 40-mile march through the hills in 30 below zero weather.
And they were guided by the northern lights.
A spectacular display of the aurora borealis lit up the sky and guided them to safety. The agent at Fort Pierre was furious that La Barge had outwitted him.
So his opposition ended, but on his own terms and profitably.
And it made the AFC value his skills more than ever. Shortly after, he returned to St. Louis and got married.
All of this plays out on the stage of the Missouri River, which was, for a century, the main artery of the American West.
It was the Great Highway. Everything, military, commercial, it all revolved around the river. A reality that's hard to even imagine today. That glory is completely gone.
Wiped out by the railroads.
A phase of history that's just passed into oblivion. A river that was once teeming with steamboats now doesn't have a single regular packet boat.
And the scale of this river system is immense.
The Missouri-Mississippi is the longest on the globe, over 4,200 miles from its source in the Rockies to the Gulf of Mexico.
The Missouri itself starts at the Three Forks in Montana.
Right, where the Jefferson, Madison, and Gallatin rivers meet.
Yeah.
And its major tributary, the Yellowstone, is a massive river in its own right.
But the character of the river that La Barge had to master was its alluvial nature.
Exactly. Once it leaves the mountains, it flows through these deep bottoms of silt and sand. The riverbed itself is constantly in motion,
Creating sandbars, new islers, and a shifting channel.
The channel was almost never in the same place 2 years in a row. It would eat away at one bank for years, then hit an obstacle and completely change course, carving a new path.
It's a perfect metaphor for the era itself.
It is. The geographical impermanence of the river mirrors the incredible pace of commercial and social change La Barge lived through. His skill was based on reading a constantly changing environment.
A skill that became obsolete almost overnight.
Just like the steamboat trade itself. The river's fleeting nature reflects how quickly that whole world vanished.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning something new. That's all for now, but in case you didn't notice, there are a lot more episodes on this subject available on this channel. If you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share with other history buffs.
While this is an AI recording, the research that has gone into this production is comprehensive and focuses on very specific moments in history, designed to bring as much detail to the listener as possible. Thanks again for listening in.